Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Indie Diarist podcast, a show on the human stories behind indie game development. Speaking to you today is your loyal indie diarist, Anthony L. Wolf, writer, narrative designer, and senior content manager in social media, as you guys already know. And today's episode is with a lovely solo dev from the United Kingdom based in Essex. His name is Chaz, and he reached out to me via Twitter, which is now X, unfortunately, and I decided to host him on the show because his passion is just incredible. You'll see as you listen to this episode. Now, before we dive into that, here's a tiny little reminder from me, which is the Indie Diarist is an entirely listener-supported show, and will likely remain so for quite a while. So the Patreon page for the Indie Diarist is now live and has been so since August. So you can go onto patreon.com/the Indie Diarist like that, without dashes or spaces, and check out all the lovely little tiers that I've designed for you, which include everything from preview access to all episodes before they go live, behind-the-scenes content, and a lot more. And of course, I'd like to take this chance to shout out to my first two Patreons, Angelissa, the admin of the Indieverse community, and Zucchini, developer of Folklands, a beautiful resource management sim. But without further ado, let's get into today's episode with Chaz, a developer from the UK. Alright, hello everybody and welcome to a new episode of the Indie Diarist podcast, showing the human stories behind indie game development. I've got a new guest joining me today and his name is Chaz, and I'll just hand it over to you, Chaz. Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, what you do and where you're based, and what you're doing right now.
Cool. Thanks, Ant. Well, my name is Chaz. I'm an independent video game developer and I would say aspiring musician, but it's just something that I can kind of work into my games as well, so it's just something that I do on the side. I'm based in the UK. I've been making games pretty much full-time since around 2009, but learning a lot about how to make them for many years before that, and going back even further, I guess, ever since I was a kid, I've been making games and board games and sorts. So, just as I got older and sort of technology became more available, I just sort of lent into it because I was passionate about it and have been lucky enough to make a career out of it.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, that's I think that already answers some of the questions that I had further down the line, but we'll get into them as we go. So there's one question that if you listen to my previous episodes, you'll know I ask every single guest as an icebreaker to open these episodes, which is, what's one game you think everyone should play at least once?
That's an easy question. It's got to be Final Fantasy VII.
All right, okay.
It's the pinnacle of everything that is good about video games, in my opinion. I think the writing is amazing. The music is timeless. Oh, yeah. Even down to the way that they broke the sort of technological barriers with the FMV sequences and the backgrounds, and to me, even the charm of the blocky characters. I think it's the best game ever made. I'm extremely passionate about it. I've even got a couple of tattoos about Final Fantasy VII.
Wow, yeah. What are your tattoos? What have you got?
Well, I've mostly just got a sleeve of sort of neo-traditional sort of Sailor Jerry stuff. But one of them is, I asked my artist to do me like a feather in a vial, so it's sort of like a phoenix down. And I've got the 7 from the logo tattooed on my index.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good stuff. Right. Yeah, no, that's definitely a good game to pick because it's definitely one of my favorites. Probably one of my favorite Final Fantasy ever. Final Fantasy games ever. And yeah, no, I totally agree. So, and just out of curiosity, what are your thoughts of the remake? Because I loved it until the very strange twist at the end. But yeah, I think. Well, yeah.
The funny thing is, Ant, I actually haven't played it. I haven't played it yet.
Okay.
No, right. I've been meaning to. I played the demo. There was a demo on PS4, and I don't actually have a PS4 with my brother, so I just sat down and downloaded it and give it a quick go. From what I played from it, it was good. It felt sort of a lot like Final Fantasy 15 to me. It was very, very action orientated and that kind of thing. But yeah, I haven't really been able to properly dive into it. It's something. It's what having a backlog of games is like. It's on a perpetual to-do list.
Too well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
but I'm excited. I'm excited to play it. I think what I'm probably doing is holding out for all the pieces to be released, and then I'm just going to sort of
That's smart.
do them all in one. I'm happy enough to do that because I've got enough to be getting through at the same time. I'm also a little bit scared about playing it because I don't want to tarnish the amazing.
I see what you mean, and what I can say is that you're in for a ride because it's. I loved it, honestly. I think they've done an amazing job. There was a lot of love that went into doing this remake. There are a few bits that don't really work for me, but you'll see once you play them. I think the smart thing is to wait for all 3 parts to be released if you want to wait that long, and then you dive into it and play it all at once. But yeah, it looks like there's a clear vision behind this remake, and I would say it's not going to tarnish your experience of the original because that's pretty much very well etched into my heart. It's going to be a good remake with some differences that you'll notice. But yeah, it's
what system did you play it on?
Oh, PS4.
Okay, because I've been lucky enough to sort of get hold of a Steam Deck lately, and it's supposed to be like really good on Steam Deck, and I don't know whether it would be good to play it on a big screen or whether it would be quite cool to play on a handheld. So
yeah, well, that's I haven't got a Steam Deck, but yeah, I've heard that it's incredibly good for a lot of different games, so it's amazing what they were able to do. But yeah, so this has become a podcast about Final Fantasy VII, or
I'm happy about that.
Definitely not. But yeah, so I guess that this answers my next question too, which is which games do you remember playing growing up, and do you think they had an influence on your work? Funny enough, your game is Sylvester versus Little Beezy, and I played it as you sent a copy to me using the Steam Curator system. And not a lot of people on this podcast who listen to this podcast will know that I do have a Steam Curator page named The Indie Diarist in Steam, where people sometimes send me indie games to try and review. And yours was one of those. And I don't say yes to all of them because I just don't have the time. But yours, I wanted to try because, well, first of all, you left a nice message with it. But also, I loved the impact of the art style and such. But it's very different from a JRPG. So I'm wondering, what kind of games did you play growing up, going back to the question, and do you think they had an influence on the kind of things that you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first off, thanks for your really kind words about the game. And yeah, they've definitely had an influence. I've put little references and Easter eggs in my games throughout the years. So Sylvester versus Lil Beezy that you were playing on Steam, that's my first Steam release. But before that, I was making Flash games for, I don't know, about 10 years maybe. For about a decade, I was plying my trade with sort of online browser games on Newground and Congregate and things like that. And a lot of those games have references, either character names or small parts tucked away that reference my favourite games. And pretty obviously there's a lot of Final Fantasy VII stuff in there if you dig deep enough. Some of it's quite obscure and some of it's kind of just for my own gratification, I guess, but yeah, they're in there.
Right.
As far as games that I played growing up, I think they do influence me. Every game that I play influences the way that I design things in certain ways, because it's good to get a broad range of experiences, and then if you encounter some kind of problem, you can say, oh well, how does this game do it, or how does that game do it, and then you can kind of put them all together, if that makes sense. It could be something simple, like if you've got a weapon system and you think, well, how would be the most effective way to change weapon with the control scheme that I've got? And then you think, well, I don't know, the weapon wheel in GTA or something like that is quite an elegant solution, or anything like that, really. And then you can pick and choose. So I would definitely say that the games that I've played or the games that I've played lately have influenced the design that I'm doing at the moment. Games that I played when I was growing up, I think they're things that I'd always want to make. So, for instance, I would say that my top games were Pokemon Red,
right?
The original Grand Theft Auto, the sort of top-down 2D thing, Another one is sort of along the JRPG lines, which is Suikoden, and they've all got parts in that I would love to put into a game, but they're all quite big. And being an indie, it's kind of difficult to get such grand ideas into games. So, for instance, in Suikoden, you're going around and you're recruiting characters and building up a castle. Or GTA, it's an entirely open world. Pokemon, there's in Red, there's 150 monsters and a whole story and things like that. And things like that as an indie, they take a lot of time, they take a lot of planning. And coming from a Flash game background, it's kind of difficult to make those kind of games. But the influence, I would say that the influence is there, the aspiration to be able to do something like that, it's constantly sort of gnawing away in the back of my head, and I would love to do something a bit larger scale like that, I suppose.
Right, yeah. So, well, there will be a question about that near the end, but you're not the first person who says that you've started in Flash, and I've had a couple recently. They said, "Oh yeah, I was doing games for Newground and all of those, and of course all the influences from your childhood. I'm sure they will be there and they will come through when it comes to about the weapon wheel in GTA. I think that I agree with you. That's a very interesting design choice because I can remember when, like for example, GTA San Andreas or Vice City, you just had to scroll manually through all of your weapons using R1 or L1. If you were in PC, maybe your mouse wheel, but you didn't have like a wheel where you could just jump from one weapon to another that quickly. So that usually meant memorizing exactly what your next weapon was supposed to be, and your muscles would get there. But yeah, it's a very elegant design choice. That one, totally agree with you. And when did you realize in all this journey that you wanted to be a game developer? Was there like a specific epiphany moment, or did it just happen over time?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I was always sort of creative. I was always making things when I was like really young. I was always designing board games, and the first game that I made on a computer was on a spreadsheet. It was a choose your own adventure, and I'd write the story, and then I'd say, to do this, go to line 91 on the spreadsheet. I was only a kid, and then I would save it to floppy disk, and then I would design like a cover and box art, and I would basically create an entire game. I'd create the whole product, and I was only a child, but I was interested in the whole. And another really silly thing is, and this is, growing up in the 90s for you don't get it so much now, but when games used to come with like not just instruction manuals, but they would be part of the experience. They would be part of the game. You would buy a game and it would come in a nice box with an instruction manual and sometimes extras and things like that, and it would be a whole package, and the whole thing was really inspiring, and I just liked everything about it. I liked the whole creativity of it. I liked the way that you could just build up a world outside of the game as well through the manual or with something that it came with. So I was always doing little bits like that. I've still got some of them tucked away somewhere, some of my old things like that. But I think being interested in stuff like that and little Warhammer figures and things like that, it all just sort of came together, and then making video games felt like the best way to be able to do that, I suppose, if that makes sense. Like it was the most accessible way to. I mean, you can do the artwork, you can do the music, you can do everything, and then you can put it all into one package, and then you can put it on the internet, and then literally millions of people can see it. And when you're starting, when it's something that you're making in your bedroom, and then it's getting millions of hits, it's quite unreal. And it just seems like that was the most effective way to be able to. I don't know. I don't want to sound corny, but to tell the stories that I wanted to tell. Because I mean, if you look at some of my games, I mean, some of them don't have stories, but there's a few where you can see that there's a message that I'm trying to convey and things like that. And yeah, I think, Anthony, that it was just more. it was a great way to concentrate an abundance of creativity, you know.
Yeah. And I think the magic of video games is that as a kid especially, you don't realize how much work goes into publishing a video game. It's like you get a game, you get it in the nice box, and actually someone worked on that box. Someone designed that box in the first place, and then someone worked on the art. Someone worked on the handbook and a little manual that maybe you got in those games in the 90s. And I still have some from. I think I still have the original Crash Bandicoot manual because I had like. I've had them in a nice box myself for PS1, for the PS1 console, and someone did the illustration, someone did the game itself, someone did the publishing and sales, someone did the marketing, and all of that. In the end, you realize it's a huge machine that allows things like games, but also books and other things to actually come to the world. And when you realize that you want to be a part of that, it's always a magical moment. So I do absolutely relate with what you say. It's a great place to be. How did you become a game developer? As in, how did you study actual game development, or did you just do self-taught at some point and just roll with it?
Well, I left school when I was 11 years old, and I was homeschooled for a bit, and then it was just. Basically just sort of growing up in the school of life, I suppose, and I pursued the things that I was passionate about. And I used to read a lot of video game magazines.
Me too, yeah.
Yeah, like
amazing.
I think the top one, which is pretty cool actually, there was a TV show in the 90s in Britain called Games Master. Which had a famous astronomer called Patrick Moore, and he was a brain, and you would have people go on the show and they would ask him for tips and things like that. And it was also a really big magazine in the UK as well. And I was lucky enough, I used to read a lot of this. And I sent in a game idea to them in 2004 or 2005. They used to have a section where you could send in game ideas and they would publish it. And I remember getting up at about 6 a.m. once, and I sent them off my game idea, and then I got an email back. And it said that the message wasn't delivered. You know when you send off an email and it says, your email wasn't. And I thought, I got up early and I spent hours writing up this game pitch, and then it wasn't delivered. And I thought, Anyway, I was reading through the Games Master magazine issue like the month after or something like that, and they published it. So they'd obviously received it.
Okay.
And then I think it was the... I don't want to get this wrong. I think it was the 300th issue of Games Master magazine or something like that. I got in touch with Robin Valentine, who was the editor of Games Master at the time, and they ended up doing a full-page spread, basically showing my original game idea that I sent in when I was a kid, and then it was a screenshot and an interview of where I'd come, because I was a full-time game developer at the time. So that was a kind of cool thing. But anyway, that was sorry, I've sidetracked a bit there. But
it's basically an absolutely beautiful story there. I wasn't expecting anything like that.
It was quite it was a moment, you know. But yeah, I used to read a lot of games magazines, Games Master being the primary one, and they had a section in there. And it was funny enough, you were talking about San Andreas, GTA San Andreas, and it was like this whole Bigfoot conspiracy and things like that.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And they posted up this rumour, and it had a link to a website where you could find out more. So I went on the website, and it was a Pro Boards website. I don't know if you've heard of Pro Boards, but basically... I don't know if it still exists, it might do, but you could go on there and you could set up your own website. You could set up your own forum for free. So that led me to Pro Boards. So I started doing Pro Boards, and then that led me into the design community. And then, long story short, everybody was battling for as many members as they could get for their community. And then it turned out that the best way to do it was to make Flash games, because somebody who had thousands of people as members on their board, they were making and distributing Flash games. So I ended up looking into that as a method of trying to get more eyes on my design forum. Silly when I think about it, I mean, you know. But it kind of led me down this path, and then I started to look at some of the Flash games that were out. some of that early Newground stuff and some of the stuff that was on Miniclip at the time. And
Miniclip, yeah.
and I remember thinking, everything is there. Everything, the interactivity is there. I can go online and I can play a game, but these are amateur. These are clearly made by somebody on their own in their bedroom or something like that. And I remember looking at it and thinking, I can do that. And I could, as a 14-year-old, I was looking at it thinking, I think I can do this better, because, you know, I wouldn't want it to be amateur, you know, because the artwork was crude and the sound was bad. And I mean, little did I know at the time how really difficult it was to actually make something even just to that level. But it set me on a path, Anthony, and then I ended up just teaching myself how to draw within Flash, which is a program that I still use for all my artwork to this day. I use Macromedia Flash 8, which is why it still looks like my games come straight out of 2008, because it's the same tools. So I learned how to code ActionScript, I learned how to draw in Flash, and then just over the years working with people and sort of improving my work, and then it just led me to where I am now, really.
Right. Well, I wasn't expecting this kind of story. It's definitely interesting that you started from reading game magazine, which is pretty much my same path, except I'm doing games on the side rather than as part of my full-time job. But yeah, I also started reading games magazines thanks to my uncle, who bought a lot of them. So then I started buying them myself, and then I started getting into games, and I started writing about games online. So for a while I wrote about games online, and then I realized I actually wanted to do them. So I started writing stories for games, and now here I am, basically doing it as my side project. Maybe one day I will be a full-time dev myself. But yeah, it's always great to approach an industry from just the fringes, if you get what I mean.
I totally get that.
And then you start learning how it works and all of that. But yeah, it's interesting that you still use Flash to do your art. That's incredible. And in terms of, now let's get into your current project, or actually your first release, your first Steam release, which is Sylvester and versus Little Busy. What led to the development of that game? Was there a specific idea of something that sparked the inspiration, or did it just come like that at some point, seeing maybe a random artwork online?
Well, the thing with Sylvester is it came from a game jam. So when the we hit the pandemic in 2020, and I used it as an opportunity because it was around the same time that Adobe stopped supporting Flash as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'd been making Flash games for so long, and then it turns out that actually it's not viable anymore. I can't do it because it just won't be supported. So I thought I need to learn how to make games like purely on my own, because with Flash I used to do the artwork and team up with a programmer.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the time I would be let down in some way. So I would spend hundreds of hours creating assets for a game that I planned to release on sort of home consoles and PC and things like that. So I'd have all these assets, and then for whatever reason the programmer would duck out, and then I'd be left with hundreds of hours of work and nothing to do with it, and it would be a complete waste of time. And it would be for a game that I was desperate to make as well. So I figured during lockdown that I should teach myself as much as I can to be able to do everything that I can. So I entered Ludum, I don't know how to say it really. I don't know if it's Ludum Dare Game Jam, and I went in for the 72-hour one, and I thought, well, I'll go in for it, and I'll use Game Maker, because with Game Maker I can do the artwork in Flash, put it into Game Maker, and I can do the coding as well and the music, and I'll be able to do everything myself. And if it comes out rubbish, it comes out rubbish, but I'm going to test myself. And another rule that I made for myself was that I wasn't going to ask anybody for any help, because it's good. It's good to go on the Discord, and if you've got a problem, you can ask. The Game Maker community is brilliant, and you can go on the Discord and you can ask them, say, "Oh, this isn't working. How does this work?" And they'll be happy to help you with it. But I thought for the game jam, I'm testing myself with this, so I've got 72 hours. I'm going to do everything myself. So I entered that game jam, and out of it came a game called Don't Kill Death or Die Trying. And there was a character in it called Sylvester who I'd been sitting on for a while. I really wanted to do something with him. So I made this little game jam with him. It was my first ever game jam, my first thing that I'd ever finished in Game Maker. And it got voted third for fun out of nearly five. It was either 5,000 entries.
Well, and I can testify that the final result that came out of the game jam, so your Steam release, is indeed very fun. So I could say I can see why they voted it fun, even though it was just a game jam. So yeah.
Well, the Ludum Dare thing, the whole lockdown thing, that I wanted to do something more with that character, and I was working on a blockchain project, or I'm still working on it. It's called Crittercraft. I'm working on it with a guy called Gaz, who made some really big Flash games. He made Super Stacker and Red Remover, and they got like billions of views online, and we teamed up to do Crittercraft. And then this other game jam came along, and I thought, well, I'm going to take a break from this, and I'm going to spend 2 weeks making this new game. And this turned out to be Sylvester versus Lil Beezy, and I worked so hard on it, Anthony. I was up like almost every hour. I would sleep on the couch for like a few hours, and then I would get up and I'd go straight back to work. For the 2 weeks, I worked almost every hour. I'm not even exaggerating. I would stop to take my dog for a walk. I would stop for lunch, and then I would get a few hours sleep. And I worked really, really hard on it. Because there was a 10 grand prize for the top game, and I really wanted it. I really wanted that money. I ended up coming 5th, but
still pretty good result anyway.
Yeah, it was a pretty cool prize pool. I mean, it was PewDiePie announced it on one of his videos.
Oh, right. Yeah.
There was a cash prize significantly smaller than 10 grand though, and one of the other prizes was that it was going to be put into an arcade machine. That still hasn't materialized. I don't think that's ever going to happen. But the cool thing is, somebody that I share an office with, he actually put it on his arcade machine. So I did end up getting to play the game on an arcade machine. But yeah, that's where that came from, sort of a bit of a long story. But it was a character that I'd made, and I wanted to bring him into something else. And this opportunity came along. And so it came out of a game jam. And then I just thought, well, I'll expand it and put it on Steam.
Yeah, and actually, now for listeners who have been listening to this for a while, we may want to say what exactly Sylvester versus Lil Beezy is. So, do you want to describe it in like maybe a couple short sentences?
Yeah, so I'd say that it's a 2D roguelite shooter, I suppose. It's pretty straightforward. You're going from left to right, basically, and when you kill enough of the horribles that are coming your way, you get some experience, and then you pick a power up, you level up, and then you continue, and then eventually you have a one-on-one fight with the main antagonist, who's Lil Beezy, who's voiced by my brother. I was living in Vietnam at the time, and we were both living in Hanoi, and I called him up and I said, because he'd done voices for Don't Kill Death, and I said, can you come and do some voices for Lil Beezy? So he came and voiced Lil Beezy.
Well, that's nice to hear that your brother is voicing your characters anyway. I've got a similar relationship with my sister. Like, she's done the art for most of the podcast. The backpack that you see in my logo, I've drawn it, but she's colored it, and same for the big banner that you see on Twitter. So yeah, it's always nice to work with your siblings on some projects, because it's
nice to keep it in the family.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, and what is, well, you already kind of answered this question, so I expect it wouldn't be much different, but why are you a game developer? What is it that drives you forward and pushes you on every day?
That's another great question. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I think it's legacy. And I think it's the opportunity to leave behind a body of work that I'm proud of and that people can get enjoyment out of. But it's also a way for me to put my full creative attention into something, whether it be art, story, music. Yeah. And I think it's a way of being able to do something that will last longer than me. I know that sounds quite deep, and when you look at my work, you see sort of cartoony, 2D sort of flash characters. But when I think about it, I think that's essentially what it is. And a bonus of that is being able to do something that I genuinely enjoy and be able to make a living out of it. I mean, it's not easy. Sometimes it is kind of like the starving artist mentality. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's very difficult, and you have to be self-motivated. But I'm extremely, extremely passionate about it, and I feel that I'm lucky enough to. It's my vocation, you know. I feel like I've been lucky enough to be able to do something that I genuinely feel like I was born to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's a combination of being able to leave behind something that I'm proud of and something that I think I'm not too bad at as well, and that I'm willing to keep trying to get better at, you know.
I think the legacy concept is so powerful, and a lot of creatives, I'm sure, will resonate with that. And it's the whole reason why I write myself, and a lot of reasons. It's the whole reason why a lot of other people that I've interviewed in this podcast are working on games. I mean, they haven't worded it the same way, but a lot of people in the indie game development community, I'm sure they feel the same way. They want to do something fun, something that other people will find fun and that they can be remembered for. And I think that's really great. It is deep as it is deep, but sometimes things just have to be that way.
It's like I said to you, I think it's a great question, and it is something that I have been thinking a lot about. And when I get down to it, I think, well, it does sound very kind of, I don't know, it may be over the top, but when it boils down to it, I just feel like that's what it is. It just feels like, you know, it just feels right.
Yeah. And, well, you've mentioned that you've connected with a lot of developers over Discord and such, because, of course, you were just kind of helping each other, and there was that challenge that you put yourself to do at some point. But do you have any heroes in the industry, anyone that you look up to?
Yeah, I do. And I wear my inspirations on my sleeve, I think. And the two main ones I would say were Dan Paladin, who does the artwork for the Behemoth. So if anyone's not familiar with them, they published Castle Crashers, Battle Block Theatre, Alien Hominid, that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, I could see his style in your games. Actually, that's what they, especially in Sylvester. But yeah, absolutely, I could see him.
The thing that I really love about what Dan Paladin, along with Tom Fulp, the guy who runs Newgrounds, what I really love about what they'd done many years ago was they transcended Flash. They made Alien Hominid and they put it on Newgrounds, and it got millions of views. And then they formed a company, they published it to console, they were doing conventions in Japan, and they published a Game Boy and Xbox and all these kind of things. And that was through, I mean, Dan Paladin, as far as I'm aware, he still uses Flash MX, which is even further back than Flash 8. So they managed to achieve all these massive dreams. They sold millions of copies of their games. People love their work. And it was just through simple, just 2D Flash games, essentially. Everything's drawn in Flash. Castle Crashers is just completely drawn in Flash MX. And that's what I find really inspiring with what Dan Paladin has done with his artwork. And I would say that my second main inspiration would be Edmund Macmillan.
Oh yeah, I can see him too. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, their artwork, it just makes sense as you say these names, and I think about your game. It just makes sense that they're your heroes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think essentially what I've done is I've blended the sort of the dark characters that Ed is kind of known for with the colours and the sort of the pop that Dan Paladin sort of is known for. So what I've tried to do is kind of, because I'm not really I don't think I'm a dark person. You know, I don't like horror movies. I don't like, I just don't like dark stuff, you know. I like The Simpsons and I like Rick and Morty and I like colours and I like things that pop and, you know, that excite the brain and things like that. So I think what I've tried, but what I really do love about Ed's work is the honesty and sort of vulnerability in it, and I try to meld that into something that's my own. But yeah, I would say that they would be my heroes in this space, in the sort of indie development space.
Makes absolute sense, and a lot of people look up to Edmund. I just recently watched for the first time, because I had missed it, the indie game, the movie, the documentary about him.
My name's in the credits for that.
Oh, really? Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah.
The backers, one of the backers?
Yeah, as a backer, yeah.
Right, yeah, okay.
Nothing more, unfortunately. But.
I've just watched it for the first time recently. I knew it was good, and I just never got around to watching it. And of course, Edmund is part of the trio that is featured there, alongside Fish and Jonathan. But yeah, I mean, it's just so inspirational to see his journey in that film as well, in that documentary. And I can see why he's one of your heroes. It's definitely one of the people who got out of that documentary better than others. Yeah. But anyway, well, I think we're approaching the end of this lovely chat, and there's one more deep question that I have for you before we wrap up with a couple more fun ones, which is, do you ever feel lonely or discouraged as an indie game developer? And if you do, how do you cope with that?
Oh. Wow, that's a difficult question, because the whole nature of making indie games is almost a perpetual cycle of sacrifice. To be able to, especially with something like a game jam, I mean, when I spent that 2 weeks making Sylvester vs. Lil Beezy, I didn't see any friends, I didn't have any social life, I had to cut everything out. I would say, yeah, most definitely, yeah. You have to, it goes back to that thing I was talking about where you have to be self-motivated. You have to know that there's an end goal, that you're doing it for a reason. If you didn't have that in you, then it would be very, very difficult. I think you just have to weigh up whether the sacrifices are worth it or will be worth it to you in the long run. It's a difficult question, Anthony. But yeah, I would say that answered it pretty well. Yeah. Yeah, I would say that there is, there is a struggle there. There is a struggle there, but you have to do what you can to make it easier for yourself, whether that be sort of taking care of your physical and mental health and things like that. You have to try and find a balance, which is difficult. Yeah, of course. And now for some fun questions for you. Imagine writing a letter to yourself, but 10 years younger. What do you think you would say? I would say keep going. Keep going, because everything that you're working towards, you'll find out that the entire thing is a journey. The whole thing is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. Just keep going, just keep working and chipping away at it, and it's one step at a time, and then eventually you'll look back at it and you will see that those things that you used to dream about, they're now very real. I mean, I did mention this in a message to you before we started chatting, that through colleagues, I've now got Nintendo developer status, and the game will be going onto Nintendo Switch soon, which is just unreal to me when I think about when I started making Flash games in my bedroom to be able to publish a game on a Nintendo platform. So I would say... And how's that going? I mean, have you already started with the port process, or... Yeah, so the port is being handled by Charles Gresham. He goes by the name 6-Bit Glitch, and he got the dev kit and he's ported it to the dev kit. He's compiled the build and he's tested it out. It's essentially good to go. There's just Nintendo are very strict on.
Yeah.
They have some very strict policies on the way that the games have to run and the way that it affects the hardware and things like that. So we're just polishing off all those sort of rough edges before we get it ready to publish for good.
Perfect. Okay. Great. And lastly, if you had unlimited budget and time, what game would you create?
Probably it would have to be a massive open world game of some sort. Essentially, what you're saying is, what is my dream game?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what? I don't know. That's a difficult question to answer because of the nature of flash games and indie games. You have to think sort of small scale. That's a difficult one for me to answer, Anthony. Honestly, all I know is that it would be open world.
Okay.
And there would be a lot of things to do and a lot of exploration and a lot of adventure. Mm-hmm. But what kind of shape that would take or what theme it would be, I don't know.
It's totally fine. I think it's a great answer. And to be fair, you're right about the nature of indies being very small in scope and shape and all of those. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I feel like, yeah, a lot of you're not the first one who says a big open world. Some people say an MMO. Some people say pretty much the same thing I'm doing now, but bigger. So there's all sorts of different approaches to this question, and I think yours is more than excellent. So, some parting words for us. First of all, I'm curious: are you working or thinking about your next project already? And if so, can you give us a hint?
I've always got about 3 or 4 things on the go at one time, you know. I'm still working on Crittercraft, which is my blockchain game.
One, yeah.
Yeah, it's essentially where it's kind of like Pokemon and Minecraft put together. You get ingredients and you craft them together to make creatures. Mm-hmm. That's a perpetual thing that's ongoing. And I have started work on something that I'm tentatively calling Sewers of Goose. Which is the next Sylvester game, which is it's kind of like I guess like Brotato mixed with Nuclear Throne. There's kind of survival elements, sort of a 2D roguelite shooter, but there's a twist in that you can spend your experience points on items slightly differently than the way that's already been done. But it's super early at the moment, but it feels good. It's nice and juicy, and I'm having fun with it. I've just got to sort of really dig into that.
Yeah, well, I'm sure in time you will find the right approach there. So yeah, well, thank you so much, Chaz. It's been an amazing chat with you. It's been fun, and we've gone down so many different memory lanes. just talking about Final Fantasy VII and game magazines and all of that. So, where can other people find you? And if they do, what is the best way to support you?
I would say that the best way to find me would be my website, madebychaz.com. I'm about to launch my redesign I've been working on for the best part of a year, and that's just going to have everything on there, and it's going to have links to my Newgrounds and my itch.io, and it will just be the hub for all of my music and all of my games and absolutely everything. So madebychaz.com.
Right. And do you have a timeline for when the website may be published, the new one?
I'm hoping within the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Perfect. So by the time you guys listen to this episode, the new website will already be up, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, well, again, thank you so much for your time, Chaz. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Best of luck with all your projects. And yeah, it's been such a pleasure having you on the Indie Diarist. I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
And that's a wrap on another episode of the Indie Diarist podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and thanks a million to Chaz, who's been such an amazing guest and such a fun one to have on the show too. So yeah, I hope we will do something again together again, and maybe we'll meet over a pint to discuss Final Fantasy VII, which I'm sure we'll spend a lot of time doing. So if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show. You can find it on all the major podcasting platforms, basically everywhere you get your podcasts. You can also leave a rating to support the podcast. Apparently, it pleases the the gods of the algorithm, or so I've heard. And if you do want to support the show monetarily, you can go on patreon.com or Ko-fi and subscribe to a tier or leave a donations. And you can find links to both Ko-fi and Patreon, and also to all the social platforms where I'm most active on the indiediarist.com, where you'll find a lovely and cozy landing page. You can also join the Discord server from there, and I hope to see you soon, especially as this community gets even bigger. So, lastly, if you're an indie game developer yourself, please get in touch at anthony@theindiediarist.com, because I'm always looking for amazing stories to tell, and my listeners are just as hungry as I am to hear them. I'll see you next time.